never be afraid to ask for help, or never be afraid to ask questions and try to find out. And so that really comes from just continuing to educate yourself, because even if you are like the biggest expert in whatever respective field you are, you always need continued education.
Welcome to Spur Equity's Spur Your Wealth podcast, your ultimate guide to passive income through real estate investing. Join us as we together discover the secrets of building wealth one passive investment at a time.
From expert insights to inspiring success stories, this podcast will inspire you and empower you to take control of your family's financial future so you can live life on your own terms.
All right, everyone, welcome to another episode of Spur Equity's Spur Your Wealth podcast. We are your hosts today, Param Singh and Rav Singh from Spur Equity. And so on the Spur Your Wealth podcast, we aim to bring successful investors and experts and thought leaders on our podcast, really just to share their story and their secrets to investing. And so we can all stand to benefit from their experience. And so before we start on today's episode, I do have to say that the beard game on today's episode is going to be amazingly on point. It's going to be epic today. So the beard game is on, because on today's episode, we have our dear friend and someone both Rav and I both admire, Mr. Yonah Weiss. Yonah is a powerhouse with property owners' tax savings. So he's a business director at Madison SPECS. It's a national cost segregation leader. We've used Madison SPECS on a lot of our projects, and they've assisted clients in saving hundreds of millions of dollars on taxes through cost segregation. He has a background in teaching. He's a passion for real estate and loves to help others. He's a real estate investor as well, and he hosts one of the top podcasts, Weiss Advice. So extremely happy to have Yonah on today. Yonah, welcome to the Spur Your Wealth podcast.
I appreciate you guys having me. It's really a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Before we get started, I really want you to tell our listeners a little bit more about yourself, about your background, and how you got started in this industry and kind of what you're doing today.
Absolutely. Well, as you mentioned in the background introduction there, I was a teacher for many years. That is really my background, but got into real estate about 8 years ago when I had a little bit of a crisis in my family. And without going into the gory details of that, I found real estate and started investing, started learning about it, got my broker's license, was doing some commercial mortgages, and really just kind of getting my feet wet in a lot of different areas, but always had that passion for teaching and helping others. Before I got into real estate, I also had started a nonprofit organization raising money for families who had gone through difficult situations, losing a family member or health situation where they, just needed additional financial aid. And, I was actually a fundraiser for several years for that organization I founded, helping obviously to raise funds for these families. And that's always been a real, passion of mine. But in the real estate game, it really allowed me to expand my network, extensively and get into investing, learn about the industry. But at the same time, especially with this cost segregation gig, which we'll get into, in teaching and continue that teaching that I've been doing, which essentially when I found out about cost seg, and probably our listeners are thinking to themselves, what in the world is this cost segregation thing he's talking about? I never heard of this. And it's pretty common. What I found when I first heard about cost segregation, when I was offered a position at this company, Madison, I also didn't know what it was, but I started asking everyone that I knew in the real estate world, what they thought about this. And the majority of people I asked also had no idea. No idea. It was like there was a spectrum. It was like either there was a very small minority of very sophisticated investors that I knew, a couple of mentors of mine that knew what cost seg was, used it, and had been doing it for years. And the vast majority, I'm talking like 95% of people I spoke to were real estate investors, brokers, mortgage brokers, etc. Anyone in the industry had literally never heard of it. Okay, so it wasn't like there was very little middle ground of people like, oh yes, yeah, of course, cost seg, but don't use it or whatever. So I found there was this gap that needed to be filled, which was just education, really. And I was like, okay, wait a second, I can just use my background and my skills as a teacher and take this really kind of complicated tax concept and strategy and just explain it. And once you know what it is, it's like a no-brainer. It's like, oh, wait a second. I can actually do this, and I can actually save, thousands or millions of dollars on taxes. It's like, why didn't someone tell me about this, before? And so that's really where I kind of was able to merge the real estate investing as well as the teaching background and kind of bring it to light through this cost segregation business.
Good teachers can take these elaborate concepts, this really hard to understand concepts, and break it down into just, these are the steps, this is what you do, this is how you do it. And you can tell the difference, right? I see you online. I see you on a lot of different, things that you're active in, including LinkedIn. And you have the ability to break stuff down and really, show to people what can benefit, how cost segregation can benefit them. So for that, kudos to you. My wife's a teacher. I've been seeing her in regards to just, interacting with kids. And it's that passion, right? At the end of the day, if we don't have passion, no matter what it is, how simple it is, you're not able to, get the most out of it, right? And so I feel like, you have the passion of serving, you have the passion of educating and letting people know how this can help them. So kudos to you for that.
Thank you. It's just
Yeah, and I have to say, I'm guilty, right? We were guilty because when we started out in some of the investing, in the real estate investing that we were doing on the small and mid-size, kind of multifamily that we started with, we didn't do any cost segregation. We didn't know that was a tool that was available to us.
Right.
And it was you actually that shed that light to us about cost segregation, bonus depreciation, all this stuff. And so, when we got into the syndication world, not virtually, but every single opportunity that we did since then has been, there's been a cost segregation component because it's so advantageous. So again, for our listeners, if you could do a quick, kind of break it down, like what is cost segregation? Why are we so, what are the advantages of doing a cost seg and, especially on a, larger multifamily?
Sure. Yeah, I'll break it down very simply, just kind of in a few steps. And like Rav was saying, break it down in steps. So the first step is just understanding that it's a really cool tax strategy. Okay, that's it. It's a way for you to save money on income tax if you're a real estate investor. Second step is that understanding anytime you buy a property, besides for your primary residence, you're able to take a deduction from your income tax called depreciation. And it's a borrowed term. It doesn't mean that your property is actually going down in value, right? That's what depreciation sounds like. That's what it means. But it's a borrowed term as a name of a tax deduction based on the principle that things go down in value. So the IRS is going to give you this tax deduction as if your property was going down in value every single year. Why they do that? That's a discussion for a different time, maybe. I'm not sure the philosophy behind it, but cost segregation is just an advanced form of that depreciation, which allows you to take bigger deductions during the earlier years of ownership. So it's a cash flow mechanism, essentially allowing you to pull from this pool of potential deductions and take bigger deductions in the first year. So simply put, when you buy a commercial property, you depreciate it over a 39-year period. For residential, including multifamily, over a 27.5-year period. That means the IRS says, you buy this property, we're going to take your purchase price. We're going to subtract a small amount for land, which does not depreciate. And then over this long period of time, we're going to allow you to take this quote unquote depreciation deduction. But again, it doesn't mean your property is actually going down in value. Now, that's about a 2 to 3% deduction every single year of the property value. And it's not intrinsic to the property because it's based on you as the owner. Because every time the property changes hands, this depreciation starts over. Meaning it's not based when the property was built in, 1950, and today you're buying it and you're like, oh, it's already been depreciated. No, it's a deduction based on you as the owner and based on your purchase price. Okay, so instead of taking a small amount every single year's deduction, you can, again, pull from that pool of potential deductions and take like a lump sum in the first year or the first few years. And that's the process of cost segregation, which is an engineering process of breaking down the property into its components. But I don't know if you want me to get more into the gory details of how that actually works, but essentially that's what we need to know. And that's why it's such a powerful tool, because if you can, and you ask any tax advisor, if you can have more deductions today, right? How can I reduce or how can I reduce my income tax liability? How can I defer my income tax liability? How can I, take more deductions this year so I can use that money to reinvest? The time value of money is so important, and that's why this is such a powerful tool.
Exactly. And so you've been obviously, as a real estate investor, as a broker, you've been educating, you've been taking it on your own. And so we've been doing the same thing, right? When we invest in properties, we're hiring your company and other folks who are doing this work, and then we're taking the depreciation. But what's next after we take the depreciation? If you can explain to our audience, if you are an investor who's a passive investor who's investing in deals, or if you're an active investor who's already working in the real estate field and you're still investing in properties, can they benefit from it? I mean, can they save on taxes?
Yes, absolutely. There's a difference between who and how, right, we can benefit from it. But certainly, essentially, when you take this depreciation deduction, it reduces your income tax liability. However, there are certain contingencies of who can use this or to what extent it can be applied. And this is really important. For a passive investor, someone who's not a real estate professional, they're allowed to use this deduction to reduce any passive income that they have, meaning any of their real estate investments, or if they have other passive business investments, or other passive gains from the sale of real estate or the like, you can use this deduction to help reduce or offset that. Any extra deductions will carry forward, and you can use them in the future. However, if you are a real estate professional, which I know the two of you are, being brokers, and this is so important for someone who is a broker, that either you or your spouse, so either one of you needs to be this, and then you both can benefit from it, you can then use this depreciation deduction, or this cost segregation, bonus depreciation, if you will, and use that against any source of income that you have, which is really where this tool becomes extremely powerful for people who are more actively investing, or people who are brokers and have real estate investments as well. You can essentially wipe out any tax liability you have whatsoever. And I'm sure you guys can speak to your firsthand experience of having zero tax liability, even if you're making 6-7 figures, et cetera. Which is, it's a very powerful tool. But again, just to reiterate, people think that real estate investing is like, some magical tax shelter. It's not so, right? If you are a high-paid, W-2 or high-paid employee of some kind, and you're not a real estate professional, you are going to have limitations. It's still going to be beneficial because from the real estate income that you're getting, it will essentially be tax-free during the life of ownership, which there's almost no other type of investment that I'm aware of. Oil and gas is similar, but almost no other type of investment that you can actually make money and not be taxed on it.
Definitely a very powerful tool that obviously we have in our arsenal, right? In regards to planning that to see how we can pay less taxes. And I'm a proponent where, I live in a society, I live in a community where overall taxes, they help you, they help the city, they help the government. So we want to pay some taxes because at the end of the day, we're consuming and we're using whatever our cities and our constituencies are giving us. But at the end of the day, I don't want to overpay, right? And that's where tools like these help. And then people ask us, what is, because people hear it, what's accelerated depreciation? Maybe if we can spend a couple of minutes just on that.
Yeah, so accelerated depreciation essentially just means we're taking the building, and instead of lumping everything together on a 27.5-year schedule, we're saying there's certain components that actually depreciate on a 5-year schedule, like furniture, fixtures, carpeting or flooring, cabinets, countertops, shelving, window treatments, all this stuff, anything that's essentially non-structural to the building. All of that can depreciate on a 5-year schedule. And so we're going to accelerate that depreciation and allow you to take those deductions over that faster 5-year period. There's also a 15-year schedule, which is land improvements, things that are outside like landscaping, pavement, you have a parking lot, and other types of things like that. And you're able to accelerate those deductions as well. Where it becomes extremely beneficial is with this law called the bonus depreciation, which previously was 100% bonus, allowing you to take 100% of those accelerated depreciation deductions in the first year. So instead of spreading it out over a 5-year or 15-year period, which is more accelerated than that longer 27.5 or 39-year period, so you're getting, you're usually going to be in the first 5 years doubling or tripling your tax deduction. You can actually take a huge lump sum of that, 100% of that in the first year. And that applied to properties purchased between 2018 and through the end of 2022. So you can still do it even if you haven't done it yet, which is great. However, this year in 2023, if you bought a property, it's gone down to 80% bonus, allowing you to take in that 80% of those deductions up front, and the remaining 20% can still be spread over those faster accelerated lifespans. And it's going to continue to phase out by 20% each year. So it may come back to that 100% bonus, which is great, but even still, cost segregation by itself, as we've kind of briefly explained, has been very beneficial.
I mean, we work with a lot of folks that are in that W-2 scenario, right? That they're high net worth, they're doing their job and all that stuff. And so I love this, concept of it's not how much you make, but it's how much you keep, right? And so they've used this strategy, with us and with others where, they're investing in real estate, so they're getting a depreciation. But anytime, especially when they make a gain, so when we sell a property and they make passive gains within that year, they know that part of their strategy is to redeploy capital that same year so we can get a negative, we can get some depreciation to offset those gains. So that's part of their strategy, to be able to do that within the same year so that, they can offset those gains. And, and they don't have to be real estate professionals to do that. And so a lot of W-2 folks are taking that strategy that, especially because of this bonus appreciation, the accelerated piece where it's all at the front end, right? That every year they know they have to, make a purchase, right? Or buy into a syndication or do some sort of passive investment to get those, so to get that depreciation to offset any gains that are coming that year in terms of cash flow and things like that. So that's been an active, part of their strategy. Especially high net worth individuals. Again, they're both W-2 and they're still doing it. I did it for a number of years as well before I became a real estate professional. And so to understand this, well enough to know that, hey, I have to, and working with our tax professionals, our CPAs, that, hey, how much do I have to invest to offset what my tax liability is going to be this year? Those are the types of questions that they should be asking their CPA to be able to know that, hey, this is how much I have to do and get, this much depreciation to be able to, at least make a good impact on your tax liability.
Yeah, and we keep using this word strategy, and that's exactly what it is. When you're investing, you have to be proactive, and you have to be thinking about, long term as well. It can't just be, okay, I'm going to throw some money, I'm going to pay whatever taxes I have to pay, etc. You can have a CPA who's knowledgeable in this and actually proactively figure out ways to reduce your tax liability year after year. So it's not necessarily going to be coming from your CPA unless they are, also a tax strategist and coming out there to help you. Unfortunately, it's very common for people to just have CPAs that are, they're just punching the numbers and going to give you a bill, and show you, hey, this is how much you have to pay at the end of the year, without, giving you opportunities to see, well, what can I do to invest, or what can I do to help offset that, et cetera.
I think this is such a humongous topic that we can probably talk about this for a couple hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, right? And because of the amount of learning and education that we get from you, you have in the past come to one of our webinars where you've talked about this and we've recorded it. And so I know some people have gotten benefit from it. So thank you for doing that. Maybe, in the future also, if there's a need, we'll call on you to see if you have, another 60 minutes where we can specifically talk about strategies on that.
Sure.
But I also want to get into today, because business is business, right? And we talk about business all the time. But I also want to talk about, Yonah, like what drives you, right? What, is faith important to you? I'm assuming it is, right? Is identity important to you? Kind of tell us about what drives you. When you wake up in the morning, do you think about just business all the time, or about life in general? I want to kind of get deeper into you, Yonah Weiss itself, right? Talk to us regarding who you are as a person.
Yeah, I love that. It's great. And Param alluded to this earlier with the beard game. Really, I mean, we're visibly, bearded individuals from different faiths, but for similar reasons. And I think there's a lot to. This is a very deep question, and I could literally go on for hours about this. But I'm not I don't think of myself as a business person. I think of myself really as, First of all, I'm Jewish. I'm Orthodox, very, ultra Orthodox or religious, Hasidic. There's different names for it, whatever. Mm-hmm. And the point of that is, being a servant and being a steward. And that's really my responsibility, is to my family, to my community, to God, and to, there's more to life than just, money and business, etc. And I would say just the opposite. I mean, that's a very minuscule amount of life that should be focused on that whatsoever. And in fact, because of my background in teaching and the nonprofit world, I never really had any background in business or finance or anything like that, and never had any interest in it whatsoever. And until I was kind of thrown into it, because like I said, I had this crisis came up, I was thinking, how can I use real estate to help make more money so that I can help more people? Really, in the end of the day, that's my goal, is, the more money I make. And I actually heard this amazing quote, and I don't know who it was from, but it just spoke to me so deeply, is that some people say when your income increases, it says don't change your what's the word I'm looking for? Don't change your
lifestyle?
Not your lifestyle, but don't increase your lifestyle. Okay, there's a word. I'm blanking on the quote. It was kind of funny because it rhymed, but don't increase. Oh, there it is. Don't increase your standard of living, but increase your standard of giving. Right?
Giving. Excellent.
And so that's really, to me, what business is really all about. To me, is opportunities to give. And it may sound counterintuitive to a lot of people. And I actually did a podcast with this exact topic with a good friend of mine, Bernard Reese, who's a CPA based out of New Jersey. And we just talked all about giving in business. And this was, the premise is, there's a book out there called The Go-Giver by Bob Berg, highly recommended. And he talks about this concept of just going out of your way to help people altruistically in business. Seeing what you can do to make connections, to try to help other people. And in doing so, you'll end up getting back tenfold or 100-fold what you put in. And so that's how that's how my day goes. You talk about when I wake up in the morning. First of all, I take the first few hours out of my day where I'm like totally disconnected from everything except for, I do prayer and studying and connecting to holy things. And then only later I'll open my phone, computer, et cetera, and go to the office and work on my business. So there's a direct, I won't even look at anything before that, before I've completed that and kind of
that's beautiful.
Acted. I think it's really important. I'm not saying everyone should be doing to that extreme level, but you have to take a certain amount of your time when you wake up in the morning, right? Don't look at your phone first thing, right? Focus on what's important to you. I mean, after this life is over and we don't live forever, right? You got to think about what are, and I saw this in The 7 Habits by Stephen Covey. He spoke about this in such a way that just reminded, right at the beginning of the book, what are people going to say at your eulogy? Are you going to talk about how great a business person? Is that what you care about? How much money you made or how many business deals you did? I think it's about how, good of a person you were, about your ethics, about your morals, about how you treated other people. And to me, those are the most important things. And that's what I kind of think about in every interaction that I have. Those are the things that I'm thinking about. The money will come, money will come.
Right. Yeah. Right. I mean, money is there to fund your lifestyle. Go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, that's beautiful. And again, I see so many parallels. I mean, Rav and I have these conversations with ourselves and with our family, and it's virtually parallel. You talked about earlier about teaching and about, raising funds for fundraisers for communities and nonprofits. And like Rav and I, the way we, kind of our early life was all around that, around nonprofits. We were helping nonprofits kind of launch and raising funds and help, doing things, faith-based nonprofits as well as community nonprofits. And again, that's our passion, and we continue to do that. And you're absolutely right. This whole concept of having more allows you to give more. I think back, growing up, my father and my mother, they gave me, and again, it's all rooted in faith. It's rooted in Sikhi, from our perspective. But my father, growing up, we didn't have much. We really didn't have much. But what my father and mother taught me is that it doesn't matter how much you have, you always have enough to give. You always have enough to give. And so, we were taught the same thing. And so, I see a lot of parallels, exactly what you were saying from a lifestyle perspective, that even in our case, and that's one of the reasons I love real estate, is because it's a business that allows us, there's abundance. There's plenty of money to be made across, the partnerships that we have. But you don't have to squeeze anybody to make that money, right? And you can't, that's not true of all businesses necessarily, right? You don't have to gouge or squeeze anybody. In fact, like when we're, dealing in multifamily, for example, it feels good running our business plan because we are giving back to the residents. We are improving their standard of living. We're elevating their living conditions and all of that stuff. And, they feel good about it. It's a win-win-win across all people that are involved. And that's one of the reasons I love this business as opposed to anything else, because you're always trying to, sitting at a negotiation table, for example, you're trying to get more while somebody else gets less. And here, it's not necessarily the case. There's so much more collaboration and so much more partnership that you actually feel good about what you're doing rather than, again, ethics and morality and helpfulness. So that's one of the reasons that it drives us to the same thing, because we can feel good about it and not feel guilty from our faith, what our faith drives us from. So yeah, I completely agree with everything that you just said.
Yeah, I mean, it can be that way. As you said, there certainly is a component. I'm sure there are people out there who are in it for the wrong reasons and are out there trying to, gouge as much as they can out of it. And it does come out. And unfortunately, though, you have in the media people talking about slumlords and things, and they do exist, right? It would be foolish to think, naive to think that people like that don't exist, but it is a minority. And I totally agree. I think you have such an opportunity, especially as a multifamily investor, to improve the lives of the community members. And that's so huge. I mean, they're your clients, really. I mean, that's your residents are your clients. And so you can interact with them in that way and to help, make the best out of the situation for both people.
Absolutely.
And you had said something very, just early on, like, the money will come, quote unquote, right? And so what we learn in any of the businesses that I've been in, that operate in that way, is that if you take care of your people, right? If you take care of people, money will come. So like I was in consulting, for example. And so, the main driver was take care of your employees, they'll take care of your clients, and the money will come, right? If everyone feels taken care of and supported, then that should be like the number one thing on your business plan or your business, whatever strategy, because if you're taking care of the people that are important to your business, then the money will automatically come. And so I feel the same thing about, real estate.
Yeah, and real estate in general is a people business. I mean, you guys know it as brokers more than anything, right? It's very much a people business. It's much less about buildings or property than it is about the relationships and the people between the brokers and the sellers and the buyers and obviously the residents. And so when you think about it like that, you kind of focus more on that, you're obviously going to be in a good place and going to make the best scenario for everyone.
What I learned a long time ago was that your business grows, right, to the extent that you grow. And so you have to think things differently, look at things differently. You have to do what you were talking about, getting up in the morning, if that's important to you. You have to associate with people the right way. You have to read books and network. And so you have to grow, because when you grow, your business grows. And yeah, we are givers, right? So the more I give, the more I get. And so that drives us, right? And so the concept of really what we call saint soldier, right? I mean, you have to look inwards first before going out there and looking outwards. And so that duality is always there, but I think that helps you grow at the end of the day. So that's great. So what are you doing right now? Of course, education, of course, cost segregation. What's your plan in the future, next few years? Are you looking at getting into funds and doing your own work? Give us insight into what's coming in the next 4 or 5 years for you.
Yeah, so I don't really plan that well. I kind of look for opportunities to come as they come. Although I have been investing passively as a limited partner for the past several years in multiple syndications, getting my kind of learning about different businesses, including multifamily and self-storage, even a retail property, some RV parks and mobile home parks. And I'm actually very interested in like the affordable housing and mobile home parks, mobile home communities, or manufactured housing communities as they're called, can be extremely. We talk about improving the lives of residents. It's such an opportunity because some of these parks are just in disrepair, and you can come in and really change the lives of people who are in. For a lot of them, I mean, there's really different classes of them. There's certain classes that are really kind of the low income housing. But there are many that are very working force, kind of middle class, and just looking for better opportunities to live with these, newly developed manufactured housing communities, very similar to multifamily. So that's what I'm looking at in terms of fundraising and doing that. I have done some, because of my background in fundraising, I found it like almost natural to do that for multifamily or for real estate investing as well. So I have done that on the GP side a couple of times, and I do expect that to increase over the next couple of years. Although I really enjoy what I do now, and the cost segregation expert thing is, like I said, I'm doing podcasts and just having fun, just helping people, and going to Bigger Pockets next week conference in Orlando, and you're going to be speaking there. So it's it's fun going to conferences and doing these kind of things. So the more I can do that, the more the happier I'll be, I think. Being involved as like the operations or asset management side, it really doesn't really pique my interest too much. I've done it a little bit, and I didn't enjoy it. So if I can find a good spot of doing what I do and maybe teaching or whatever that aspect is within a partnership, I will certainly consider doing that more.
Right. I think that balance is so important, right? To have that, and you attending all these conferences and meeting people obviously serves your business, but at the end of the day, it stems from what you said earlier. At the end of the day, you're a teacher, so you're giving back. Yeah. You're educating people, educating folks, and hopefully is changing lives for their investors. And when they're going back and offering that type of solution, that type of concept to them. So it's self-serving, but it's a good thing because that's something that is a focus for you. So I can already see that. Tell us about a couple of books that you're reading. I know you're big at when I attended one of your podcasts, and I know you have a large list of folks who tell you the awesome books that are there. What are some of your top few books that you've enjoyed reading that maybe our listeners would also enjoy listening to?
Yeah, I dropped a few of them earlier. 7 Habits is definitely one of my all-time favorites. The Go-Giver, mentioned that earlier also. I just finished a book. I listened to the audio first, and then I read the physical book. Someone sent it to me, and I was like, okay, someone sent me the physical book. I'll read it again. And I got so much more out of it. It was called Who Not How by Dan Sullivan and Benjamin Hardy. Just an incredible book. I'm putting into perspective using your abilities, and each one has like kind of their unique abilities, and using them and focusing on finding other people to do the other things that they're good at and collaborating, and the amount of growth that can come from that. I mean, it's really helped me. When I listened to it first, immediately like I hired an assistant, and then now I have 2 full-time assistants, and they just really have completely changed my business entirely. Kind of taken email off my mind and shoulder, like almost entirely. And that's just been incredible. So that's another book I would highly recommend.
Right. Okay. Awesome.
I like what you just said, because everyone that starts a business, or even starts in real estate investing, even at a small level, like a single family home, and doing that, like I'm guilty of this as well. Like, I thought I had to be the best at every aspect of my business.
You do everything on your own, right?
Learn everything. Exactly. I mean, I'm the guy that and Rav, teaches me, he pushes me to move away from that and leverage other people's expertise. And I'm so, thankful that he has that mindset. But I would be the guy that, no, we got to know how to do this, and we got to know how to do that. And, I got to build my own website. I got to do all this. So it's like, you got to be the best at everything that you do. But no, like, there's so many opportunities to collaborate, and exactly what you said, like, leverage. Real estate is a business of leverage, and we think about leverage in just one sense, a loan, right? Or a mortgage or whatever. But, Rav has taught me that, you have to leverage time, right? Leverage other people's expertise, leverage other people's, passions. And so, the things that you're not good at, let them fill the gaps so that you can continue to focus, and so you're not spreading yourself out really thin. And so that definitely has transformed our business to be able to do that. I think those are self-imposed hurdles for growth that you have to. I mean, education is one thing. Definitely educate yourself on the things that you're doing, but you don't have to be the expert. You don't have to be the single point of contact for every aspect of your business. And I completely agree with that. So yeah, who, not how. I haven't read the entire book, but we definitely have changed our mindset from that as well.
Yeah.
So, Yonah, as we wrap up here, I want to try to get some final thoughts. Anything else that you'd like to share with our listeners? Any valuable lessons that you've had along the way that folks can benefit from, or any other resources that again, folks that are in this world that we're in can benefit from. If you would like to share some final thoughts with us.
Sure. Probably the biggest thing that has helped me along the way, and as a teacher, it's just something that I've always lived with, is never be afraid to ask for help, or never be afraid to ask questions and try to find out. And so that really comes from just continuing to educate yourself, because even if you are like the biggest expert in whatever respective field you are, you always need continued education. I never forget an eye surgeon, family friend of mine, who also he's a real estate investor, a really incredible person. He was one of the top eye surgeons in the country, experts, and would speak at conferences and all this kind of stuff. And he was telling me about, he read this, new article in some journal or whatever, and this kind of new method or something. And he was like, now I'm going to, learn this from this expert in, some whatever was some university. And I was just fascinated. Here's someone who's, the expert in his field and been doing it for 30 years. And now he's going to be the student because there's some new way to do things. And so always be learning, always be educating yourself. And I think it's really key when it comes to real estate, because you do need to pivot, from time to time. Things happen, you have natural disasters happen, you have, pandemics. We all know things happen out of our control. We need to figure out, what can we do when something comes up to kind of pivot or change. And so education is really key, because you can learn new ways to do things.
That's wonderful. That's great. You mentioned pivot. I mean, a lot of folks that in the last few years have done real estate investing and multifamily and other asset classes. Mm-hmm. I mean, they've had to pivot this year a little bit, right? And figure out new ways. And that's one of the things that we did is move into, we did one fund into industrial, which is hedging against inflation. So
sure.
Same thing. We had to learn that. We had to learn, hey, how do we do things better? Bring something new to the table that's going to work in today's reality. Whereas, some stuff that worked 2 years ago, 3 years ago is not going to work today. And so absolutely, educating yourself, reassessing. Rav said this earlier also, inwardly as well as outwardly, right? Mm-hmm. You have to continue to reassess both to try to figure out where you can make the most impact. So that's beautiful. And so, Yonah, I know folks have gotten so much out of today's discussion. And I'm sure folks that are listening want to figure out how they can connect with you directly. So can you tell us, if they want to connect with you directly, or, obviously we mentioned your podcast, Weiss Advice, but how does somebody get in touch with you or reach out to you, or your social media, et cetera?
Yeah, sure. I'm very active on pretty much all the social platforms. LinkedIn is probably the one I'm most active on. Twitter, now called X, I guess, Instagram, etc. You can find me on any of those platforms, and feel free to send me a message, but don't just hit the follow button. I always tell people, make sure to write a brief message. It takes about 5 seconds. Say, hey, heard you on the Spur Equity podcast. That was great. Love to connect. And so love to make new connections, and happy to speak with anyone.
That's great. So, Yonah, I can't thank you enough for spending your valuable time with us. It was really great to reconnect with you ourselves, and I'm sure, again, to share you and your story with our listeners has been a blessing. So really want to thank you so much for being on our podcast. And again, like Rav mentioned this earlier too, that we want to dive in a little deeper, right, for our listeners. And so we're going to reach out to them and reach out to our investors about, some of the topics that you've shared, and maybe we can go, dive deeper into a webinar. I think that would be really advantageous for them to be able to, connect with you and have a little bit of a Q&A also, right, in their specific scenario. So if you're open to that, we would welcome that. But again, thank you so much for being on today's podcast.
Yeah, thank you guys. It's been a pleasure.
And for those of you tuning in, thank you for being with us on the Spur Your Wealth podcast today. Again, we are your hosts, Param Singh and Rav Singh from Spur Equity. Remember that your financial journey, or for your journey to financial freedom, begins with both knowledge and action, where knowledge is power,
But action is superpower. So until next time, happy investing. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Spur Your Wealth podcast. We hope you enjoyed the valuable insights and inspiration. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast and stay updated on future episodes filled with actionable tips and strategies.
If you want more information about our investment projects, visit us at SpurEquity.com. If you have an inspiring story to share and would like to be a guest on our podcast, email us at podcast@SpurEquity.com. Until next time, happy investing.